Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, briefed congressional leaders about the boat strike campaign in the Caribbean allegedly targeting narco-terrorists. The most controversial yet, a so-called double-tap lethal strike that targeted survivors of an initial strike in September.
The Armed Services Committee, both Democrats and Republicans, have had an opportunity to view that video. How they decide to proceed with it, I'll leave to their, to their discretion.
It's about getting truth for the American people. The American people are entitled to see the unedited videos.
The Gang of Eight in Congress that was briefed is made up of the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and Senate, along with the chairs and ranking members on the intelligence committees in both chambers. But lawmakers are trying to force Hegseth to release the unedited videos to more members. Buried deep in the $900 billion defense spending bill released this week is a provision calling for unedited video of strikes conducted against designated terrorist organizations in the area of responsibility of the United States Southern Command. If the Pentagon doesn't comply, then Hegseth will see a quarter of his travel budget.
Audio in this morning after a crazy near mid-air collision. A JetBlue flight leaving the small Caribbean nation of Curacao en route to New York had to abruptly stop its ascent to avoid colliding with a U.S. Air Force plane. The JetBlue pilot spoke to air traffic control basically as this played out. Just listen to this.
We almost had a mid-air collision up here. Traffic passed directly in front of us, within 5 miles of us, maybe 2-3 miles. But it was an air-to-air refueler from the United States Air Force. They don't have their transponder turned on. It's outrageous. We had to stop our climb and actually descend to avoid hitting them.
The flight was near, that JetBlue plane was near Venezuela at the time, which is notable because the incident comes as the U.S. military has stepped up its campaign and presence there amid President Trump's anti-drug trafficking campaign in the Caribbean, and also the attempts to continue to increase pressure on Venezuela's government. JetBlue now says that they've reported the incident to federal authorities. Joining me right now is CNN transportation analyst Mary Schiavo. Mary, that audio, that back and forth with air traffic control is quite something. What do you make of this?
All right, everyone. New audio has just surfaced that raises scores of new questions about the way the United States military is carrying out strikes on alleged drug trafficking boats off the coast of Venezuela. And now it looks like those strikes are putting hundreds of Americans at risk. If you thought this scandal was bad before, stick around because it just got much, much worse. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm bringing you this breaking story, and you need to subscribe to our channel right now if you haven't already. You'll help us stay in business, and we'll keep you informed about stories the mainstream media isn't covering properly. The ongoing military strikes off the coast of Venezuela continue to raise alarm in Washington, not to mention questions about whether drunken Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is a war criminal. As of this week, the military has carried out dozens of strikes without Congress granting the military authorization to do so. And in at least one case, Hegseth is said to have ordered a double tap strike, exactly what he likes to do to a beer keg, to kill survivors of one of the initial strikes. That is, according to military regulation, a war crime. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Let me give you a brief recap of where things stand right now before we get to this new audio that changes everything. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, briefed congressional leaders about the boat strike campaign in the Caribbean, allegedly targeting narco-terrorists. The most controversial yet is a so-called double-tap lethal strike that targeted survivors of an initial strike back in September. The Armed Services Committee, both Democrats and Republicans, have had an opportunity to view the video of this strike, but how they decide to proceed with releasing it publicly has been left to their discretion. The American people are entitled to see the unedited videos. The Gang of Eight in Congress that was briefed is made up of the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and Senate, along with the chairs and ranking members on the intelligence committees in both chambers. but lawmakers are trying to force Hegseth to release the unedited videos to more members. Buried deep in the $900 billion defense spending bill released this week is a provision calling for unedited video of strikes conducted against designated terrorist organizations in the area of responsibility of the United States Southern Command. If the Pentagon doesn't comply, then Hegseth will see a quarter of his travel budget withheld. Gross, isn't it? Well, it just got grosser than gross, so stick around. The lingering questions over the September 2nd double-tap attack have prompted Congress to demand release of the unedited video of the strike, something Pete Hegseth is refusing to do. Gee, I wonder what he has to hide. Thus far, the only reason Hegseth still has a job, for the time being anyway, is that Donald Trump thinks he looks great on television and that most Americans don't really care what happens to citizens of other countries. Forget that these could just be fishermen on their daily grind and that they have no due process, and that by killing them, the military squanders a chance to actually learn more about drug-running operations if these people are actually involved. But never mind all that. Now, newly leaked audio could likely change many American minds and make Hegseth sweat bullets. You'll know when you smell the booze. As CNN reports, on December 12th, a military fighter jet nearly collided with an American aircraft during an airstrike. Thank goodness nobody was hurt, but this is absolutely insane. I'm going to play you a longer clip, but make sure to watch it all because there's a lot to unpack here. This is new audio from this morning after a crazy near mid-air collision. A JetBlue flight leaving the small Caribbean nation of Curaçao en route to New York had to abruptly stop its ascent to avoid colliding with a U.S. Air Force plane. The JetBlue pilot spoke to air traffic control basically as this played out. Listen to this audio carefully because what the pilot says is terrifying. The pilot says, "We almost had an air collision up here. Traffic passed directly in front of us within 5 miles of us, maybe 2 or 3 miles, but it was an air-to-air refueler from the United States Air Force. They don't have their transponder turned on. It's outrageous. We had to stop our climb and actually descend to avoid hitting them." Let me repeat that. A commercial JetBlue flight full of American passengers had to emergency descend to avoid hitting a U.S. Air Force plane that didn't have its transponder turned on. The flight was near Venezuela at the time, which is notable because the incident comes as the U.S. military has stepped up its campaign and presence there amid President Trump's anti-drug trafficking campaign in the Caribbean and attempts to continue increasing pressure on Venezuela's government. JetBlue now says they've reported the incident to federal authorities. CNN brought in transportation analyst Mary Schiavo to discuss what this audio reveals, and her analysis is damning. She says this was a near collision, and fortunately the pilots were doing what they're supposed to do, looking out the window at all times to see and avoid, even when traversing the skies on instrument flight rules, as commercial passenger jets always do. But here's what this says. The rather lukewarm warning that the Federal Aviation Administration put out a couple weeks ago saying, "Avoid Venezuelan airspace," is not nearly detailed enough. It does not give pilots and airlines enough information. And this situation is really a disaster waiting to happen because it's also coming out that there might be another near collision with a smaller plane that might have also happened near or at the same time. Much more guidance is needed because there have been many mid-air collisions in the past with military planes. When asked about why the Air Force jet didn't have its transponder on, Schiavo explained this is a scenario we're seeing over and over again. This was the same issue with the helicopter collision at DCA back in January. They turned transponders off because they want to be in stealth mode for their mission because they don't want to be seen by other traffic or by hostile air traffic control on the ground. The warning went out that there would be operations and danger over Venezuela, but Schiavo says the warning was not specific enough. It didn't say there would be very large U.S. military aircraft operating with no transponder, and that's how collision avoidance systems work. You have to be seen by other aircraft, and air traffic control or collision avoidance systems simply don't work. This is a big issue for American commercial aviation. You can't really operate safely without functioning transponders and collision avoidance. So there you have it. Hegseth is so excited about blowing stuff up that he's neglected to make sure American citizens don't get blown up as well. And where is Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy in this mess? Doing pull-ups in an airport? Why isn't he furious about this? What is he doing to make sure it doesn't happen again? I understand that fighter jets want to fly in stealth mode for their operations, but for goodness sake, these two departments are supposed to coordinate so stupid close calls like this don't happen. The truth of the matter here is that Sean Duffy has no clue how to run his agency, and Pete Hegseth doesn't care who dies so long as he gets to blow stuff up like he's playing a video game to make himself feel more masculine. The man has small dick energy, and if you don't recall, that's the opposite of big dick energy. And if you don't know what that means, look it up. We have a boozy, dullard wimp for a defense secretary, and the sooner he is out of a job, the better. Let me break down why this is so serious. Commercial aircraft rely on transponder systems and collision avoidance technology to prevent mid-air disasters. When military aircraft turn off their transponders for stealth operations, they become invisible to these safety systems. The only thing preventing a catastrophic collision is pilots physically looking out their windows and spotting other aircraft visually. That JetBlue pilot saying, "It's outrageous" in the audio is him being professional. What he probably wanted to say is, "What the fuck are you people doing putting hundreds of passengers at risk for your unauthorized military operations?" Because that's what happened here. Hundreds of Americans on a commercial flight nearly died because the Pentagon is conducting military strikes that Congress hasn't authorized and doing it so recklessly that they're not even coordinating properly with the FAA to keep civilian aircraft safe. Think about what would have happened if that pilot hadn't been vigilant, if he hadn't spotted the Air Force plane visually and taken emergency evasive action. We would be talking about a mid-air collision that killed everyone on that JetBlue flight. Hundreds of Americans dead because Pete Hegseth wanted to play war games off the coast of Venezuela without proper authorization or safety protocols. And this apparently isn't an isolated incident. Mary Schiavo mentioned there might be another near collision with a smaller plane around the same time. How many close calls are happening that we don't know about? How many civilian aircraft are having to take emergency evasive action to avoid military planes flying with transponders off in areas where commercial traffic operates? The FAA issued a warning to avoid Venezuelan airspace, but as Schiavo points out, that warning was inadequate. It didn't specify that large military aircraft would be operating without transponders. It didn't give pilots and airlines the detailed information they need to actually stay safe. It was a cover-your-ass warning that provided minimal useful information while the Pentagon conducts whatever operations Hegseth decides he wants to do. And let's not forget the context here. These strikes are happening without congressional authorization. The September 2nd double-tap strike that targeted survivors is a potential war crime. Hegseth is refusing to release the unedited video even though Congress has demanded it. The administration is conducting unauthorized military operations, possibly committing war crimes, and now we learn they're doing it so recklessly that American civilians are nearly dying in the process. Where is the oversight? Where is the accountability? Congress wrote into the defense bill that if Hegseth doesn't comply with releasing the strike videos, he'll lose a quarter of his travel budget. That's their big threat? Taking away some of his travel money? Meanwhile, he's conducting unauthorized strikes, potentially committing war crimes, and nearly killing American civilians through reckless operations. Sean Duffy, as Secretary of Transportation, should be raising holy hell about this. His department oversees the FAA. His responsibility includes the safety of American aviation. And the Pentagon just nearly caused a catastrophic mid-air collision that would have killed hundreds of people under his watch. Where's his statement? Where's his demand for coordination? Where's his insistence that the military cannot operate in civilian airspace without proper notification and safety protocols? The silence is deafening. Duffy doesn't know how to run his agency. He was a reality TV star and congressman with no relevant experience for this job. He got it because he's a Trump loyalist. And now, when a real crisis happens, when American lives are put at risk by Pentagon recklessness, he's nowhere to be found. Pete Hegseth is a drunk with delusions of military competence, who's treating real military operations like a video game. He orders double-tap strikes that are war crimes. He refuses congressional oversight and transparency demands. He conducts unauthorized military operations without proper coordination with other government agencies. And now Americans are nearly dying because his operations are so poorly planned and coordinated that military jets with transponders off are nearly colliding with commercial flights. This is exactly what everyone warned about when Hegseth was nominated. He's not qualified for this position. He has no experience running a large organization. His military service, while honorable, doesn't prepare him to be Secretary of Defense overseeing the entire Pentagon and coordinating complex operations across multiple theaters. And his drinking problem, which multiple sources have reported, makes him fundamentally unsuited for a position where he controls lethal military force. The double-tap strike in September already raised questions about whether Hegseth ordered a war crime. Targeting survivors of an initial strike is prohibited under the laws of war. It's the kind of thing that gets prosecuted at The Hague. But Hegseth did it anyway, or at minimum allowed it to happen under his authority, and now he's refusing to release the video that would show exactly what happened and who's responsible. Congress tried to force transparency by threatening his travel budget, which is laughably weak. They should be threatening impeachment. They should be demanding his resignation. They should be holding hearings and subpoenaing witnesses and getting to the bottom of whether the Secretary of Defense ordered war crimes and is now covering it up. Instead, we get these half measures while Hegseth continues operating with impunity. And now we learn that his operations are so reckless, so poorly coordinated, so inadequately planned that civilian aircraft are having to take emergency evasive maneuvers to avoid collision with military aircraft that don't have transponders on. This cannot continue. Hegseth needs to resign or be removed immediately. Every day he remains in position is another day Americans are at risk from his incompetence and recklessness. Every day is another opportunity for him to order more potentially criminal strikes or create more dangerous situations for civilians. Tell your representatives to call for his resignation. If he won't offer it, demand they have him removed. This isn't partisan politics. This is about basic competence and safety. This is about not having a drunk playing war games with real lives at stake. This is about not conducting unauthorized military operations that nearly kill American civilians. The JetBlue pilot who had to take emergency action to avoid collision is a hero. He did his job perfectly and saved hundreds of lives, but he shouldn't have been put in that position. The Pentagon shouldn't be conducting operations so recklessly that civilian pilots have to spot military aircraft visually and take emergency evasive action. This is a disaster waiting to happen. Mary Schiavo said it explicitly. This is a disaster waiting to happen. We got lucky this time. The pilot saw the military plane. He reacted quickly enough. Nobody died. But luck isn't a safety strategy. Eventually, without proper coordination and protocols, luck runs out. And then we'll have hundreds of dead Americans because Pete Hegseth wanted to play war games without authorization or proper planning. Don't let this story disappear into the news cycle. Don't let the White House spin this or minimize it. American lives were put at risk by Pentagon recklessness and incompetence. That's unacceptable. Hegseth must go. And if your representatives won't demand it, remember that when election time comes, primary them if necessary. Replace them with people who will actually provide oversight and hold the executive branch accountable. Subscribe to this channel to stay informed about this story and others like it. Share this video so more people understand what's happening. And contact your representatives today demanding action. Pete Hegseth is unfit for his position, and every day he remains is another day Americans are at risk from his incompetence and recklessness. That ends now.